All right.
Well, hello there, all you YouTubers out there. Thanks for watching at My Life as a Landlord. Happy to have you along today. I've got Wendy Myers back on the show. I am so excited to have her back. I hope you learned something. Okay. Hello there. Thanks for joining me. I am Dr. Jen, and I'm so excited for you coming with us today on this journey. Welcome back, Wendy Myers, to the show.
Hi there. Thank you. I'm so
Hi.
happy to be here.
I'm so happy to be talking with you, and it's so wonderful because as I've gone through this whole journey in the podcast, I'm meeting more and more savvy landlords, savvy real estate investors, and while many people think that there might be some competition, it's mostly collaboration. In fact, I think it's all collaboration at this point. So uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm super happy to have you back. Let's see what's been going on since episode 41 when Wendy was first on the show. How's your book going? Lessons from the Landlady.
Oh my goodness, it's going fantastic. This just started out as a personal goal to write down things I'd learned over the last 20 years, and it was the book I wish that I would have had as a newbie landlady way back in the day. So I'm really pleased with how it's come out. I've gotten great reviews on Amazon, and it's pushed people to my website to get my Does the Deal work spreadsheet, and it's just reinvigorated me too. It's very easy to get old and grumpy, especially when you deal with the public, right? So it's great to like do something that reminds you of how far you've come and what you've overcome and what knowledge you have, and just to reach out to other landlords because I learn every day. So yeah, it's
That's
been great.
awesome. Well, you and I just spoke when we were preparing for this podcast, and you mentioned that you attended a conference from Mr. Landlord. Mr. Landlord does lots of conferences, and they have all kinds of
Yes.
resources and stuff on their website. But how was the Mr. Landlord conference in January?
Oh, it was fantastic. He always does as you mentioned, he does a lot of different events, and this one was the retreat that he does. That's, mostly mom and pop kind of landlords, landladies, owners, that type of thing. And it's always some tropical place in January. And since I'm from Ohio, I always like to go. So yes, it was in the Dominican Republic. It was beautiful. So it's just a great place to be. And Mr. Landlord, his real name is Jeffrey Taylor. But he just does a fantastic job. If people want to look at his website, he has a great question and answer and a newsletter, and he speaks to all sorts of landlord associations. And he has a boot camp. He has an annual convention, which is great for people just starting out. I even sent my staff to that. And then, of course, he has the retreat for more seasoned folks that just like to get together. And it's just so good to be out there learning from each other and sharing war stories and all the whole thing. So yes, it's fantastic.
More collaboration.
Yes. Yeah.
That's
And
good.
reinvigoration. You come back like ready to work again, so it's
That's
good.
awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so the next retreat is January 2025 in Puerto Vallarta. And
Yes.
Mike and I live on Maui, but we're thinking that maybe we should go to that one, not necessarily for the tropical weather, but for the
Right.
retreat part, right? For
Sure,
the
and that's a
education
little
part.
closer for you than coming all the way over, to the East Coast. So absolutely you should go. And he was there, Mr. Landlord was there a few years ago at Puerto Vallarta, and it's just a beautiful little tropical town there. Everybody was so friendly, so great food. So there's some other bonuses there too to entice you there.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I know we have been talking a lot about insurances on the show recently. We've been talking about, rising costs and changing and disasters. We had the wildfires here on Maui, which has just been devastating. And
Yes.
what are you seeing? Because you're in Ohio. What are you seeing there?
Right. Well, yeah, frankly, it's been terrible. In fact, I just fired off a whole bunch of emails to all my political representatives again, which is something I do periodically when
Mm.
something comes into our world that we just think is unfair or that we need some help on. And the answer we're getting, and I know you had somebody on the podcast a few weeks ago about insurance, and it's we're all paying for these natural disasters, and there just needs to be some assistance there. Another webinar I listened to, they talked about how they imagine that the government in some way is going to have to get involved with insurance issues, and put in some, kind of like what they did with flood insurance with FEMA, with coming in with some parameters and some assistance for those of us that are trying to provide housing for the entire nation. Because I have some big policies that have, all the bells and whistles that my mortgagee wants, but it's outpacing what I can pass on for tenants and what I can absorb in my business. So for example, we had our renewal on our 4 buildings that is coming up in April is usually around a $40,000 policy. Last year it went to 60,000, and this year it's going to go up to 100,000. This
Oh my
covers,
gosh.
yeah, this covers 4 buildings. So $100,000. I mean, that's just insanity. So I'm at my wit's end, but I have a plan. I went through everything. I've gone to my mortgagee and said, hey, or my mortgage people, and said, I need some help with this. And they're like, we know, everybody does. And I said, what can we do to mediate this down? And we have a month. So I'm hopeful that we'll, be able to shave a little bit off of there. And then in another situation, I have a lot of little duplexes and things around town, and we're in a historic town. And I have one insurance company that's covered all of those. And that's probably 150 units of all different types, houses, duplexes, all that type of thing. For 23 years, they've been my people. I've not had one claim, not one. And so they just came along and said, you know what, we're not going to cover anything over 50 years old. Well, that's the entire town. So they picked and choose. They kept some of my commercial stuff. They kept the other stuff. And so we shopped out the other ones, and it was like triple the cost. So the things I had paid off, we just said, well, we'll go self-insured. We'll just get liability on it. And, I haven't had a claim in 20 some years. If I get a claim, it'll pay for, so what? My deductibles were already so high that they weren't very helpful. So we figured we could have a loss every 5 years and it wouldn't be a big deal. So
Wow.
so
Wow.
that's kind of where we're at with insurance. So and I know I'd love to hear, hopefully from the podcast, you'll get some feedback. I'd love to hear what other people are doing. I'm writing to everybody I know about the issue, and I hope everyone else is doing the same, because we definitely need our voices heard. We provide housing, and we want to provide economical housing for our tenants, plus still be able to keep up all our properties. And this insurance thing is definitely something that's impeding that progress. So
Yeah, for sure. And when it's really interesting to hear from you, because you've got just a variety of different properties, you've got different kinds of housing that you provide, and so
right,
and some of them are paid off, so you have different choices of self-insuring. It changes your
sure,
business model, different than say a newbie landlord, right, or landlady.
right,
And so it's really interesting to hear some of the choices that you've had to make, and that I'm sad to hear that it's not better. It doesn't sound like it's better any other geographical area in the US or Canada, frankly, for now. It just seems like it's
right.
spiraling up and up and up.
And we're kind of going away from what's the original intention of the insurance? It's to protect the asset, and to help out in times of, of crises. Well, now we're hearing from our insurance agents, don't you dare file a claim because they will cancel you, and
Right.
then your bank will come in and take your property. So it's like, well, what's the purpose of this? Is it to check off a box to the bank that we got our insurance that we can't even use?
Right.
It's kind of, it just is, there's no common sense here. So
Yeah. 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 Wendy, when you were mentioning that the cost of insurance is going up higher than you can recoup from tenants, let's talk for a second about rent increases, which is always
sure.
something that everybody is concerned about, especially newbie landlords. It's an awkward conversation that newbie landlords are really concerned about having. And what's your take on rent increases?
I say you have to do them, and you have to do them every year. I was in that same boat as a new landlady and didn't want to rock the boat, right? You have a great tenant in there. She always pays her rent on time. I don't want to, I don't want her to move. And you're afraid to do that. Well, a couple years down the line, your taxes double, or you get this huge insurance debacle, or, your interest rate goes through the roof and you're suddenly paying a lot more money. At that point in time, you can't go to them and squeeze, $200 a month more out of them. But if you've been making regular incremental changes over the years, then you're going to be at a point where you can weather that better. And people expect it. I mean, you go to the grocery store and everything's more expensive, and your utility bills go up, and all sorts of prices go up annually because of inflation. So it's just something that everybody, you have to do it. You have to just not be afraid of any backlash, or if they come to you, they're going to understand when you say, listen, I gotta take it up because all my costs go up. So everybody knows
Right.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
and if you do your yearly increases, now, of course, I know the listeners are from US and Canada. It's, there's quite a mix
Sure.
of where the listeners are. And so every geographic area has their own requirements on the rent increases. Some
Right.
locations are very specific that they can only increase the rent by a certain percentage every year, or,
Yes.
and then others are sort of more loose about, you can increase it with proper notice to
Sure.
quote unquote market rates and things like that. But if you do the math and you increase your rents, a small amount, even if it's 20 or $30,
Right.
that's the rent increase. Is someone going to move over 20 or $30 a month? Very
No.
likely. Exactly. Very likely
Right.
not.
They're not going to, and they're already established in that neighborhood, and we try to choose wisely about time of year when we do it. We don't do it at Christmas when they might just move back in with family, and we don't do it here in Ohio in June, July, when everybody's like, oh, it's warm, we could move all our stuff, it wouldn't be a problem. So we tend to do it like either right at school time, back to school time, because your kid's already established in school, you don't want to move right then. Or like January, February is kind of ideal because people get their tax money back. So if you're sitting there, on the fence about, oh, should I do it or not, do it. You have to do it. And depends on the area. I mean, I talk to landlords at the landlord conference that are able to give more expensive increases because of where they're at. In Ohio, it has to be reasonable, and we like that $20 to $30 range. Just so you don't, people, once you kind of hit over 50, that really hurts people, and then they're not quite so happy with it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and I like your thinking about the timing of when you do
Yes.
your rent, when the rent increase starts, the actual new amount is due, and then you back it up, proper notice of whatever area that you're in. I mean,
Right.
certain places it's 90 days, you got to tell them 4 months in advance. But if you're strategic about it, the awkward conversation doesn't seem so awkward. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you're doing it every year, that just becomes part of your policy. And when things are regular and usual, everybody, it's when it comes jarring out of the blue. Like, if I got a letter in the mail right now that said I had to pay, another $150 a month, I'd be shocked too. But if every year I'm getting $20 increases, that's, usual and appropriate and understandable.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well, Wendy, we called this episode Section 8 Nuts and Bolts. Let's talk about Section 8 because you've got
Yes,
Section 8 housing
we
and
do.
I don't. And so I wanted to pick your brain about this. So for all my Canadian listeners, Section 8 housing is a housing subsidy program for low income tenants. So in Canada, it's usually known as some kind of an assistance program. Same thing in the States. It's just called Section 8. So
Right.
Wendy, walk us through if a newbie landlord is approached by a potential tenant and they
Sure.
say, I have a Section 8 voucher. What do they do with that?
So yeah, they'll come to you and they'll say that they have a voucher, and from the part, you won't know exactly what that means, like how much of the rent is going to get paid, that type of thing. So first thing you do is you get in touch with their caseworker. They will have somebody that has given them this voucher, that they are their caseworker, and so we'll get with that person. And honestly, if you've never done Section 8 before, you should go to whichever agency in your community is the one that does the program, and sit down and talk with them. They're a wealth of knowledge. They're happy to work with good, landlords and landladies that care. It makes their job easier with, you know, when they place people, they don't want to have to keep placing people 1,000 times. It just works better for everybody if there's good relationships right from the beginning. So way back in the day, that first tenant that came to me, I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about this. I just went into that agency, sat down and talked to a caseworker, and he walked me through the whole thing about, you know, there are pros and cons. So there's things that you need to be aware of. First of all, you know, your rent will be determined by the agency. You know, and you can look up what your fair market value for your area is at HUD.gov. They every year put out the rates that are considered usual for a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom. And keep in mind, those do include utilities. So if you have a place, you know, my preference is always to have the tenant paying the utilities, of course. You know, so you don't have to play that game of trying to keep the thermostat down and control the water usage and all that type of thing. So that's something that if they say, oh yeah, in your area, a 3-bedroom can be $1,200, they're saying with utilities. So you kind of got to keep that in mind for your unit. And then when the person who has a voucher, it might cover the entire rent. It might cover 3/4 of the rent. They may, I have some tenants where they pay the majority of it and HUD pays like $87. It's just, so there's a wide range of what happens with the vouchers as far as your payment goes. Something else to keep in mind is you will have to have your unit inspected by the agency. Where I'm at, I know there are other landlords and landladies in places where their units are inspected anyway by the you know, the township or the county. They have to pay you know, a fee, and every year their unit gets reviewed or every time they become vacant. But in my little town in Ohio, that doesn't happen. So it's not something that we have to do on regular units. But on our HUD units, we do have to have an inspector come in and go through the unit with you or with someone or by themselves, and they'll tell you what if there's anything that isn't passcode, like maybe you might need another smoke detector, or a common one is a bathroom fan. Every bathroom must have a fan, a working fan. Every room must have a window that opens, those type of issues. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you have a bedroom that doesn't have any windows, then you're not going to be able to rent that through HUD. So there you may actually have a unit that wouldn't actually qualify for the program, I guess. So
if that potential tenant that comes up saying, I have a Section 8 voucher, if you don't pass the inspection, then you can't rent to that person because your unit doesn't qualify in that program. Is that right?
correct.
Okay.
And you know, possibly HUD could come to you and say, well, if you do this, this, and this, well, you might add it up and it's like $6,000 worth of things. You may decide you don't want to do that, and you can, you know, you're the owner, you don't have to accept that voucher.
Right.
So, but if it's something small and reasonable, you might decide to do it because, you know, one great thing about HUD is they do pay on time every month, you know, direct deposit. You know, and especially if they're paying full rent, it's really nice. It's guaranteed. And there is a social worker involved that, you know, there will be regular inspections. So if your tenant is not keeping up with, you know, the apartment, they can lose their voucher. And that's something that, you know, is a good, you know, incentive, I guess, for people to keep the apartments nice and up to par. So.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, in Canada, there's the assistance program is very similar, and the caseworker, they don't do inspections, but the caseworker is there.
Right.
And so if the tenant starts to misbehave or there's issues,
Correct.
then the caseworker can be contacted as well, because that's yet another contact to assist, you know, with these awkward conversations, especially with newbie landlords, right? And so I think
Absolutely.
that was one of the questions is for Section 8, what happens if the tenant, you know, causes damage in the unit or, you know, just trashes the unit. And it's like,
Right.
okay, well, you know, in that, I'm assuming you'd call the caseworker, right? Like,
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people are afraid of HUD, or they think, oh, it's low income, it'll be terrible. But what I don't realize is you do sign a contract with HUD, but it's a two-way street. That tenant is also on the hook with HUD for this free money that they're getting every month. So, you know, you got to use that to your advantage, and you have to do just like you do with all your tenants, you have to do regular inspections. You know, we do them at least twice a year, you know, furnace filter checks. And that's when you go in and you see, oh, wow, this is a wreck. I can't believe they've done this much damage. You get them while they're in the apartment. If we go in there and all the blinds are messed up, and right then is when we can get people to pay for these repairs. And the social worker will back us up on it, because we'll say, look, you guys inspected this, you know, 4 months ago. All the blinds are great. They've destroyed all of them. And they'll be like, yeah, you're right. They'll have to pay for that. And they can lose their voucher if they don't keep to their side of the bargain.
Right, right, right. Anything else that we should know about Section 8?
For us, like in Ohio, we usually have to just do like 30-day notices for everything. For HUD, you have 60-day notices, and you'll have like a window of time, like we were talking about raising rents. If you want to raise the rent, you only have that 60-day window. If you miss it, you're out of luck for a whole nother year. So there's just probably some things, there's a little bit more paperwork. And then there's just some, you know, other timelines that you have to be aware of that are federal mandated. So no matter what your state says, you got to go by that 60 days instead of the 30 days and that type of thing.
Interesting, interesting. Another set of rules, right?
Right, right. Just what we all need.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Wendy, what's next for you in your busy
Oh,
life? Are you writing another
um,
book?
I am. Yes, I actually wrote another book, which is out on Amazon now. That's not, I guess it's not really related to landlording, but it's called Lift Your Family Out of Chaos: How to Live with, Schedule, and Organize Your ADHD Family of Collectors, Hoarders, and Procrastinators. Just because I have a husband that's a big collector. Nobody's really a hoarder. I just threw that out there for attention. And a child that was ADHD off the charts. And I'm a kind of organized person. And as a landlady, I obviously like things neat and clean. So this is just like strategies I've learned over the years with my crazy family to kind of, you know, gently lead them to, you know, my way.
Oh my goodness. What's your next book going to be?
The next one will be Come Back to Landlading, and it's going to be questions and answers with the landlady. And that one's almost written because it's my YouTube channel. I go through, you know, people throw questions at me and then I answer them. You know, like, what do you do if somebody, you know, you're getting a lot of no-shows when you're trying to show apartments, and then I'll answer the question. And so I'll have like a little question and answer book with all those
Fantastic.
types of little things.
Well, you mentioned your YouTube channel. How else can listeners get a hold of you?
Oh, yes. I am Ask the Landlady everywhere on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm diving a little bit into TikTok also. And then the YouTube channel. So it's Ask the Landlady. They can also check out my website, which is askthelandlady.com. And they can email me at askthelandlady@gmail.com.
Love it. Love it. So where can we buy your books on
Yes,
Amazon?
you can
Both of
buy them
them?
on Amazon. You can also buy them through my website. Either way. Yes. So,
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Wendy, thanks so much for bringing us up to speed on Section 8 and other bits of
sure.
knowledge. I just love having you on the show. Let's do one more thing. Just to put you on the spot a little bit, as the landlady, before we record this podcast, what did your day look like before now?
Oh, the day, well, today it's Friday. But Friday started with, we got some rain yesterday, and we have a roof that we were working on, or I wasn't working on it, but somebody was working on it. And unfortunately, the patch they did not hold. So, you know, first thing at 10 in the morning was meeting with the contractor to say, okay, this didn't hold, and it went through the apartment, which is vacant, thankfully. But you know, getting them up to speed about, okay, what are we going to do next? We got to dry it out and do a silver. They're going to do a better product next time and expand the patch. So hopefully that'll work. So it started with that. And then, you know, I'm lucky enough that I do have, I have a great staff. So I work from home. So then I get to go home. And I just, you know, my manager and I email back and forth. I always pull up and see where we are. This is mid-month, so I always pull a report to see how we were doing with our rents, you know, for the month. Are we right on par with where we were this time last year, with where we were last month? And actually, the rents have been coming in very good. We've been very pleased about that. You know, you hear a lot of bad reports about the economy and stuff, but January, February, March, our rents have come in earlier than usual, so that's kind of nice. So I did some checking on that. And then I had lunch. And my staff on Friday, the guys stay till 4, but my manager leaves at 2. So it was just a little like, hey, have a great weekend. And she's out the door. And that's it. So Fridays are kind of good days because they're a little bit shorter. The busier days are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday when you're reacting from the weekend and everybody's giving me
Perfect.
their monthly reports or weekly reports and stuff. So yeah.
Wendy, you know what's so neat about you, and I want to have you on the show again. And you were a newbie landlord with probably, 1, 2, 3 doors, and now you've got
Yep.
hundreds of doors with a staff and your systems. I'd love to have you back on the show just to talk about that journey, about how on earth did you start as a newbie landlord and then
Sure.
work your way up to today. I
Right.
know, I know I'd enjoy learning about that from you. I'd love to have you back on the show.
Absolutely. I'd love to do it. Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, all you listeners out there, here's your call to action. Wendy had mentioned about Section 8 in your local area. If you've got questions about Section 8, Google or look in your phone, whichever, and find the Section 8 office, your HUD office, your Housing and Urban Development office in your local area. I guarantee you there's one somewhere, usually in a major metropolis, but I'm sure there are
Right.
satellite offices as well. And ask those questions to the caseworker that's in there. They will walk you through just like they did for Wendy. So that's your call to action. Thanks so
They
much,
sure
Wendy,
will.
for joining me today.
Thank you. Have a great
Yay.
day.
Yeah, for sure. For all your listeners, let me know your comments and questions. You can email me, learn@mylifeasalandlord.com. So happy to have guest Wendy Myers on the show today. If you know of other great savvy guests that I should have on, send them to my website, mylifeasalandlord.com. And while you're there, check out some resources, including a couple of blackout bingo cards to help landlords of all experience levels. Thanks once again for Wendy joining me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I love
Oh,
being here.
oh, I'm so
Goodbye,
glad.
everybody.
For all you listeners out there, join me next week for episode 70 as I interview a gentleman who is young in years but wise in landlording. Join me as I interview guest Kyle Johnson. I'll see you there. Okay, hang on a sec.